Okay, so this is the second part of my lecture on the rules that matter for American government. This is rules 4 to 6. I'll be taking us through some of the other key components of American government. So, rule number 4, and this is the reading from online, is Citizens United. Citizens United versus FCC was a Supreme Court ruling. So, although the Supreme Court doesn't pass laws, they only overturn laws. If they overturn a law, it can still have a big effect. And then the government, the regular Congress, isn't allowed to pass anything like that again. They might be able to do something different, but you overturn a law, that law is gone. So it's like taking a rule off the books. Well, that can have a big effect as well. So, in this case, it's a Supreme Court ruling. And Citizens United, what it did was it deregulated money in politics, okay? It overturned most limits on contributions. So it used to be individuals could only contribute a certain amount of money to different candidates and political action committees. That's what a PAC is, a political action committee. Now, donation limits to political action committees are basically non-existent. That's basically what Citizens United did, was said, if you want to donate to politics, you can give pretty much as much money as you want. There's still some limits, but because there's no limits on political action committees, what happens is everyone just donates there, right? So you might run out of your limit somewhere else, but hey, there's this conveniently located political action committee, and I can give as much as I like to them, okay? So Citizens United did not create political action committees, but it made them much more important. They were already important back in the 90s, but it made them much, much, much more important. And now, PACs are pretty much just completely unregulated. I mean, it's a little just like, ugh, come on guys, okay? So, what this means is that PACs and SuperPACs can raise unlimited funds to spend on campaigns, and two, frequently we have no idea, literally no idea, who actually contributes the money. So here's a chart that is from your reading. Okay, so this is from a reading here. Now notice this is all pre-Citizens United here. 2010. Now, money's already going up in politics. You see that through the whole 2000s. There's a sharp uptick in how much money is generally being spent in political life. But look at this, 2010 to 2012, boom, massive increase in outside expenditures, independent expenditures, okay? So these are PACs and super PACs. So the majority of the increase is driven by the increase in independent expenditures, and because it's so unregulated, in most cases easier just to give to a PAC. So you see here, there's even some shifting from, what happened to my cursor? There's some shifting from communications and electioneering, which is more standard types of money expenditures, to super PACs, just because it's a bit easier. This article came out at the beginning of 2014, and that was the midterm election year, so 2014 there wasn't much spending yet, but the article came out at the beginning, okay? So how has Citizens United affected behavior? Well, okay, there's a lot more money in politics, right? Big surprise. But that's not the end of the story. More money also means you need bigger sums of money. So the importance of big donors who can throw millions to hundreds of millions of dollars at the political process has gone up, okay? And yeah, there's donors who are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on American politics, okay? This is just one example. There's people on the left and the right who do this. People who are uber wealthy tend to be a little bit more Republican leaning, so there's certainly a few more Republican billionaires out there than Democratic billionaires, but there's Democratic billionaires out there who throw their money around as well. So, let's just remember that. But if you ever heard of the Koch brothers, it's spelled K-O-C-H, but it's Koch, okay? They're very famous conservative political players, and they didn't end up spending quite this much. They spent more, around $600 million, I believe, in 2016, but the Kochs were planning on spending as much as $900 million in 1 year on politics, giving to PACs and SuperPACs. That's a lot of money. Wow. And you can again follow up on this one if you want. Now, there's been some interesting unintended consequences of Citizens United as well, so it's important to think about those. One of the most interesting has been a reduction in what we call party discipline. So basically what happened was, in the past, especially the Republican Party was very good at holding people accountable by saying, look, the party has the money, and if you don't vote the way we want you to vote on something that's coming up in Congress, then we're not going to give you money in the next electoral season. Okay, well, what happens when Citizens United comes around and outside expenditures become more important? Well, that reduces the importance of the Republican Party as the central coordinating mechanism for giving out money, and it increases the importance of the Koch brothers and these other billionaire investors. So the Republican Party's been having a very difficult time maintaining party discipline on a number of things, exactly because they don't have the same control of the money that they used to have. Democrats were never quite as centralized in fundraising, so we've seen something similar with Democrats, but not as bad, and then also there's not quite as many Democratic billionaires, so it's a little harder to walk into somebody's office and say, if you don't do this, we're going to give you, if you do this, we'll give you $1 million. But that's what the Koch brothers do. So it used to be the Republican Party would walk into somebody's office, look, this vote's really important. If you don't do this, there's going to be consequences. If you do it, we'll support you. Okay, so then that person's more likely to do what the Republican Party wants them to do. Now it's the Koch brothers or one of their representatives. They walk in and they say, do this and we'll support you. If you don't do that, we're supporting somebody else, and we'll give them our money. And that really changes who has power, okay? So it's a lot harder for the Republican Party leadership to hold everybody accountable, okay? There's another article here if you want to follow up on this, looking at campaign donations. And it's entirely possible that the current polarized political atmosphere is not really a result of voters being more polarized, but of just more money in the system, which then more money is spent by people who are further out in the ideological spectrum, those people who are further out, thereby drawing the politicians further to the outside. Okay, so that's Citizens United. Now, filibuster, okay, we've seen this one before. So you should remember 60 votes to close debate, 60 votes to close debate, 60 votes to close debate. This one is very important. Why? Well, really, the filibuster acts kind of like a minority veto, where the minority party can prevent a vote on a bill that they don't like, okay? Now, it's not literally a veto, but you can think of it as a veto. So it's not literally a veto, but you can think of it as a veto, okay? This makes it very hard to get new legislation passed, okay? So, for example, 90% of Americans support universal background check for gun purchases, but it was filibustered. Right? Thanks, Obama. That's one of those memes things that people have been throwing around. George Bush had a majority in the House and Senate, and he wanted to privatize Social Security. Filibustered, okay? So I'm going to call this the effect on behavior a minority veto. It's very important. Lots of things, whether you're liberal or conservative, have not been passed for this reason, okay? So if you like protecting minority rights, it doesn't matter what minority you're speaking of, whether it's Democrats, Republicans, or somebody else. The minority veto in the form of the filibuster is very helpful to doing that in American politics, okay? So it's not about left or right. Okay, this is our last rule. This is starting to bridge us more towards California politics. But one of the other things that's interesting about American politics is that we're a federalist structure. Now, this is much more common than something like the filibuster or the Electoral College. There are lots of federalist countries out there. Germany is federalist. Canada is federalist. Brazil is federalist. Technically, Russia is federalist, but it's unclear if they're a democracy anymore. So, federal authoritarianism, maybe, I don't know, something like that. But technically, Russia is federalist. And what does federalism mean? Federalism is just a system of governments that splits responsibilities and powers between a central, what we call the federal government in the United States, and a state government in California, Sacramento, okay? So just, think Law and Order or whatever cop show or movie, the FBI shows in and shows up and the local cops go, oh, the darn feds are here, we don't need them. And the feds go, this is our jurisdiction, right? That fight doesn't make sense unless you're a federalist country, okay? The FBI reports to Washington, D.C., and the local cops report to City Hall, okay? But that's the same difference between being part of the federal government and being part of the state and local government. In the United States, we have this very complicated division of powers of who's supposed to do what, and then basically what happens is nobody pays attention to it. So while there's in the Constitution, there's all these enumerated powers, which is, giving things to the states, giving it to the feds, to the states, to the feds, to the states, to the feds. You have all of this. In the United States, we just don't really pay attention to it because although some powers are a little more exclusive to one, most powers are what we call concurrent powers, which means both the feds and the state get to do it, and then it's just kind of like whoever feels like doing it, okay? And then they end up fighting about it all the time. So basically in the United States, there is a lot of overlap. Here you go. There is a lot of overlap between the states and the federal government. Okay, federalism behavior. Federalism actually affects political behavior rather strongly. So first, federalism creates competition between states and the federal government. This competition means that states often try to resist decisions made by the federal government. For example, Obamacare. The federal government passed it, and then many states are just saying, no, we don't want to do this. And it doesn't matter what their reasons are. Maybe they're good, maybe they're bad. If they don't want to do it, they don't have to do it, okay? Now, there's only so much you can resist. In the end, the feds can come in and really push, and stop you. But let's take a second example here, medicinal marijuana. Technically, the feds could come in and bust up every single marijuana dispensary in California, Washington, Colorado, but they don't. It's too much work. States really want to be doing this. So, but if not for federalism, you don't have medicinal marijuana. You don't have other type things. What else does federalism do? Well, one of the best things it does is it encourages innovation. I mean, here Obamacare matters again. You may or may not know this, but so-called Obamacare, it's known as the American Affordable Care Act, was Romney Care. Mitt Romney did it in Massachusetts, okay? And Obama basically ripped from Mitt Romney's idea and tried to do it federally. And then also medicinal marijuana is another great example of innovation. California first did medicinal marijuana, actually, I think it's exactly 20 years ago. I think it was 1996, but you'd have to check me on that. But more or less about 20 years ago, California did medicinal marijuana. The sky didn't fall, we didn't all start crashing into each other all at once. Other states start doing it, and lo and behold, it's catching on. Now, somewhere around 50% of states have some kind of medicinal marijuana. And the last thing federalism does is it helps protect diversity. Just imagine if every state had to agree on everything. I'm running a bit short on time, but you get the point here. If California and Texas had to agree on gun laws, it might be World War III. We don't want that. The end.